Welcome to Women Talkin Bout AI. I'm Kimberly Pecker, joined by Jessica Parker. In today's episode, Baby Steps and Big Ideas, we're exploring how AI is evolving in the academic world and how the academic world is evolving because of AI. Let's dive in.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our second recording of Women Talkin Bout AI. Kimberly and I are excited to join you today. We have really upped our game and gotten professional microphones. So we feel like official podcasters. It took us a while to figure out how to use them, but here we are. Hopefully the audio is better this week. And then next week, we're going to up our game a bit more and actually use a better streaming service instead of Zoom, but we're learning. So thank you for your patience. The topic this week that Kimberly and I want to discuss is really just based on some real life discussions we've had recently with some of our Moxie users and faculty. We're hoping that you can relate to some of these experiences. We have a lot of the same discussions, and that's part of our goal with this podcast is to just try to share what we're learning through these discussions with faculty and students in higher ed. So the topic we wanted to touch on today was based off of an experience I recently had with a faculty member where we were working to integrate AI into some of her courses. And essentially what happened is the department decided that they weren't ready for that integration. They felt that they needed time to get a department level policy in order. And Kimberly, you've heard this. We even had a session yesterday with faculty and deans and provosts all over the US. And it's similar. And it's this sense of needing to get everything in order, to have a policy and try to, I think as academics, try to have a perfect policy that's going to address every potential caveat of the student and the faculty experience. And then what happens is just nothing happens.
Yeah, for a bunch of scientists, we're not doing very well following the scientific method of you got to try. You have to. I remember when I was working on my dissertation and my major professor said, you have to do the research in order to understand how to do the research. And it was this whole idea of letting perfection be the enemy of good or even good enough. Good enough is fine for most scenarios.
Yeah, it's like baby steps, take small steps. And for many faculty, it might just be learning to use it yourself this semester and identify opportunities for integration.
If anything, we know from other experiences with tech that when we try to implement them in ways that are big and perfect and all-encompassing, it never works out. It's better to do incremental changes that can be sustainable and take baby steps so that you can back it up, reverse direction if it's not working, make a change. But if you implement something, we have no evidence, no real data about what this is going to look like. So we can't make data-driven decisions about implementing AI.
And the research that's coming out, it's all, we use the term use cases. Like there are endless use cases for AI. There's no sort of cookie cutter solution that's going to fit. Even I think about me, the classes I'm teaching this fall, I'm teaching 3 courses. The way I am using AI differs in each course. And that's because the learning outcomes are different for each course. And the students are at different stages of learning in each of those courses. And so I think if you're looking for some sort of guidebook that's going to just tell you what to do, we're not there yet. We don't have enough research or guidance that's going to be applicable across the board for an entire department, much less an entire college or university. And I think it's a shame that we put this pressure on ourselves to find that solution because the students are already using it. And what we do know is that they are looking for guidance. They want help and they want to feel comfortable going and asking questions to their faculty. And it doesn't mean that you have to have some sort of off-the-shelf solution. It just means that you start experimenting. It's the same approach that we take in business with Moxie is we try to make incremental changes. We look at the data and then we pivot if something isn't working, or we continue down that path and collect additional data if it is working. And we talk to our users and we think faculty should talk to their students, like talk to the people who are using the tools that you're trying to implement. Otherwise, you're not going to know.
Yeah. I think it does put faculty in this really unique situation. It's just hard to be the person who's supposed to know the things and then to not know the things. I think that for academics is really hard, and it's hard as a parent too. There's lots of other situations in which this is hard, but in this case, it has from I've been in two meetings in the last, I'd say, month where it's been just a group of academics and they're saying like, we need a framework. We just need a framework. We need some sort of structure to follow to get this going, moving in the right direction. And of course, you and I have written a white paper, a framework to start. I've seen lots of them since then. I think there's a lot out there in the literature, but they all start with something like what we call functional AI literacy. They essentially all start with, do you know what the interface looks like? Do you know what kinds of interactions are going to be successful or not? Have you played with it at all? And it's just play. For me, it's just play. I like technology though. So to other people, maybe that's terrifying. But for
Mhm.
me, it's just play. Can you play with it a little bit and see what happens?
Yeah, curiosity. I told you I've been reading Fei-Fei Li's book, The Many Worlds I See, and I'm only about a quarter of the way through. First of all, what I appreciate about her is she talks about AI and she talks about it with this sort of wonder and awe and curiosity. And it reminded me of you and I, whenever we first started using generative AI, we were just very curious. We wanted to just get our hands in it and understand what it could do, what it couldn't do. And so that's the first advice I give to faculty is just look at it with curiosity and try to understand what you can use it for. And only through those interactions are you going to realize when it might be appropriate for your students to use it and how to guide them. And it's this exactly what you call play, it's curiosity.
Mhm.
And that's a low bar. That's easy for
Yeah,
faculty
yeah,
to
yeah.
think about. It's not jumping in and saying, redo all of your rubrics, rethink
Mhm.
assessment, rethink your learning objectives. That is scary. And that's a lot of work and it's a big ask.
Mhm. Yeah. Someone told me the other day, I've probably heard it on a podcast, but it was like, what's the opposite of work? And of course, most people say rest. But actually, the opposite of work is play. And if anything, academics are in high need of more play and awe and wonder. And yeah, but you know what? It's easy to say. It's very hard to do because there's a lot of fear and it's justifiable fear. There are many things changing. It's really revolutionizing the way students approach their work. And so I do think there's lots to talk about there, and honoring that very complicated truth is extremely important. And that's another reason I don't like this rhetoric of like revolution. I like the which I heard from Stuart Selber, evolution. It's evolution. It's not revolution. It's we don't even know enough right now. It's just a change, and over time that change is going to be magnified and it's going to make big differences. But right now, we can start just with small progress, I think.
Yeah, and you mentioned the rhetoric. Fei-Fei Li talks about this in her book, and it resonated with me. So she went and spoke in front of Congress in 2018. She's really passionate about human-centered AI. In the beginning of the book, she talks about the rhetoric around AI is very much around doom and gloom. It's about job displacement, about robots taking over
Mhm.
and humans losing their sense of agency. And that is scary. And the
Mhm.
unknown is very scary. But then she paints this picture of potential. And you can recognize that, yes, there are always going to be bad actors who are going to use AI in ways that we don't want them to, that are unethical and irresponsible. But that's been the case since the beginning of time. That doesn't mean we don't embrace a technology when there is a potential for good. And coming from a healthcare background, I teach in a health sciences program. And so when I'm working with health sciences students, I'm already hearing about ways AI is changing healthcare. A very simple example is the use of AI for radiology, for looking for these diagnostic patterns and how when paired with a human, it's so much more accurate because It makes sense when you think about it. A human, we only have access but to so much of our memory. And then an AI can look through patterns since the beginning of time in terms of x-rays for certain diagnostics. And when you pair a human and an AI together, the accuracy of those diagnostics gets better. And so why would we shun that out of fear that maybe that's going to displace a job? And so we can accept both. We can accept that there is incredible potential, and we can also recognize that there is potential for bad actors. But that doesn't mean that we ban it and we don't at least try to understand it and think about how it could be used in multiple aspects of our lives. Because you and I obviously use AI for more than just what we do with teaching and with research. I use it in many aspects of my personal life as well. And then I see how my students are using it and being exposed to it in healthcare environments. And so don't get caught up in the hype of the rhetoric that's in the news cycle, because it can definitely have a negative impact, but step back and just think about you and how you might can use it and experiment and have curiosity and play with it.
And start with a problem you need to solve in the moment, because that's how I've always thought that there would be some time where I would get my life together enough that I could plan the whole week out, or maybe even the month. But the reality is, I just am lucky to plan the day and stay in that day and not start future tripping to what's going to happen on Friday. And so if I just look at, okay, what do I need to do today? What are my obligations? Oh, I need to respond to these emails. Okay, start there. And that's how I use AI most commonly on a daily basis, is just to help with my email, because I can quickly put ideas in like outline form into. Right now, I'm trying Gemini for business and loving it. I don't know if I love it enough to pay for it yet, but I'm loving it. I've been using Claude too, but Gemini's right there in the Gmail interface. That's something I've been thinking about a lot too, is like how convenience is pointing us in certain directions. If your university is subscribed to getting all Microsoft products, then what's right there in the interface might be your go-to. And I think that's fine to get started. But then I think part of AI literacy is like helping people understand that may not be the best long-term plan to just use whatever is convenient. You might need to seek out other solutions. And again, that just requires a little play. And I always tell people, you're not going to break it. There is literally no way you can break the system with your own little keyboard and your hands tapping out text. That's just not possible. No human has that much power. I think it's
Yeah.
a little lesson in humility for us.
Yeah, I think you just mentioned Gemini, how Gemini, I think it's Pro, is now an option that I think you're trying out right now, and it's built into our G Suite, which is where our business has our emails and our Google Drive. And then you brought up Microsoft, and I think about Microsoft Copilot and how so many people have Microsoft. My university has Microsoft 365. I don't think we have Copilot available to us yet, but yeah, I think of general purpose tools. At the end of the day, like when you go right into a large language model like Claude or Gemini or T, you're using a general purpose tool. It can be used for many different things, from helping with emails to generating marketing copy to analyzing Excel data if you choose to use it for that. And I think those are wonderful. And I do interact with those types of tools regularly. But then we think about specific use cases that may be more high stakes. So I think about those in the legal world, in healthcare, in research. And those are the areas where I encourage folks to seek out more individualized, more specific types of tools that are just for that use case, because the stakes are higher. And it might not be necessary. If you're in marketing, for example, like all you might need is Copilot or Gemini or GPT-4. But if you're a legal expert, you might want to use an AI tool that's connected to a database that gives you more accurate responses, because it has access to past cases, to past legal cases. Similar with healthcare, we're starting to see more like medium and small language models that are connected to databases for that specific healthcare field. Like we think about epidemiology, and there's preliminary data that shows that those types of models are going to be more accurate and they're more private and they're safer. But at the end of the day, we're also still learning about not just how those models work, but whether they truly change the quality and the accuracy and the precision of the output. And that's all back to what you were saying is AI literacy is taking a little bit of time to try to understand the tool that you're using and what it's. I think about early on when these AI literature search engines came out, like we started using Cite and then there's Elicit, and now there's Consensus. And you did a really great webinar where you helped users understand the corpus behind those search engines because Cite primarily, I know it's changing, but when they came out, it was really in the biomedical domain. So if you're in the humanities, you should not be going to Cite and
Mhm.
searching for research articles. It's not going to give you what you need. And if you don't understand that, then you're going to be very disappointed. And so that's part of this literacy that I know that you were just mentioning as functional literacy. Is this tool appropriate for what I need it
Mhm.
for? What are the limitations of this tool? And doing a little bit of homework.
And being disappointed is one outcome, but I think an even more high stakes outcome is when a novice researcher uses a tool like that and notices that, oh, nobody's doing research on X. And there may be lots of people doing research on X, but those articles are not perhaps published in open access journals and databases. And so you wouldn't find them there. And it's not because there's a gap in the literature, it's because there's a gap in the corpus. And that's a big difference. And that representativeness of that corpus is extremely important.
Yeah, we're talking a lot. I hear people talking a lot more about this now. And
Mhm.
it goes back, I was talking to a librarian about this. I still teach in my lit review course, I still teach my students how to do the traditional search process using our university library database. But usually you can also find things in Google Scholar that are maybe not coming up in the database. So I tell them to continue that process. I think there's still importance in learning those skills. But then I tell them to add on, go ahead and use Cite or Elicit or Consensus or Lit Maps. And I can almost guarantee that they're going to find something additional. We always do. I always find something else. And that goes back to something that we talked about on LinkedIn about the difference between semantic and keyword search. Do you want to explain what that means?
Yeah, I will. So, keyword search is what we do when we have a Google search or a traditional database search in the library. It is that we put in a word. Let's just start with a word. We can also add Boolean operators, the ands, the ors, the nots to constrict that search or expand it. But the system in a keyword search is looking for that keyword or some part of that keyword. It's not looking for synonyms or antonyms. And so the beauty of semantic search, which is what we get with with all of these AI research assistants, is that we're looking not just for that specific keyword, but for words that have a similar meaning. So if you were searching higher ed, for example, it would only search for that phrase, higher education. But if you used a semantic search, then it would look for university, college, tertiary institution, maybe, I don't know, but it would use commonly related words to broaden the search. And that's going to give you a lot richer results. And that's why when we use, I know the thing I noticed about using Elicit Insight is that I will get things that are far outside of my field. I'll get things that, so for interdisciplinary researchers, it's really useful. But for people who aren't thinking about interdisciplinary research, it's going to broaden their understanding of what other people do. And yeah, one of the most like I the other day I was reading an article from it was from the field of rhetoric, but the researcher had used a term from I don't think it was machine learning. I think it was like manufacturing technology or something. And the two terms were machine in the loop and human in the loop. And of course, now that we are all using machines with AI as a machine, we're using them more. It's very relevant. This idea of which is in the center of the action. Is it the human that's in the loop, or is it the machine that's in the loop? And that's something, who would have thought that a rhetorician would be borrowing from this very physical science of, it was like mechanical engineering or manufacturing. I can't remember exactly, but it certainly was not in the humanities where rhetoric is usually situated. It was just amazing to me. Like, it was so relevant. It was so relevant. So I love that piece of it.
Yeah, and so many people don't think about rhetoric in that way. This was a conversation we had when we put out our AI literacies paper, where we talk about functional, critical, and rhetorical literacy. And I use that framework. It's guided some of my work with faculty. So I think I spoke about this last episode. I was working with a faculty who's outside of my field of study in marketing. I'm not an expert at marketing, but he wanted me to help him with integrating AI into his course. And even though I know nothing about marketing, the way I approached it is I was like, let's first look at functional literacy. Like, do the students know how to use its capabilities and limitations? B, critical literacy. Do they know how to critically evaluate the output? And then rhetorical AI literacy is about creating. And when he immediately heard rhetorical, he was like, no, I'm not teaching writing. That's not what the focus is in this course. And I was like, no, let's think about this. In marketing, it's all about communicating with an audience. You're communicating something. And large language models use language. Language is a tool. Rhetoric is language. And I connected these dots for him, and he was like, oh, yes, I see what you mean by creating with a large language model involves rhetoric. And yes, marketing is all about communication. You have a purpose, you have a message, you have an audience. That's all the rhetorical triangle. And I think that's what a lot of people are realizing now too, through this idea of prompt engineering, is you have to be a good communicator. You have to have some understanding of your audience, the purpose of the message, and that's all rhetoric. And I think it was a big lightning bolt moment for him. And he really just opened up to new ways to think about this idea of integrating large language models into his marketing course. And it forced us to pause and think about, okay, well, is rhetoric the right word that we want to use? Because we don't want to isolate the use of the framework so that only those maybe in the humanities or language learning will think it's appropriate. We want it to be a more general purpose framework to guide the integration of AI. But yeah, a lot more people are paying closer attention to this idea of rhetoric and language and communication because of large language models. Yeah.
Did you ever listen to on NPR Garrison Keillor's Prairie Home Companion? Did you ever
Mm-mm.
listen to that? Oh my goodness, it was this great radio show, and Garrison Keillor, and he recorded, he's from Minnesota. And so he had all these little quirky small town Minnesota characters. He also had this funny organization that he called Poem. It was the Professional Organization of English Majors. And it was about all these English majors and what they did with their lives after they had discovered that they weren't going to write the great American novel, or they weren't going to change the high school in their hometown and get all the kids interested in reading, or whatever they wanted to do. I don't know. It was just it. So as an English major, I definitely perked up when I heard that. But then I started thinking, like, Poem, it's now in the heyday of English majors using their communicative skills to help people understand what it means. And it's fascinating to me that people don't associate rhetoric and the art of argumentation with everything they do in their life, because for years I taught freshman composition, and we always used a textbook called Everything is an Argument. And the students would always start, like, they wouldn't, that was what we did on day one. Like, why is the textbook called Everything's an Argument? And we would show them PSAs, and we start with advertisements and commercials and marketing. We literally started with marketing, because the easiest place to see an argument is in marketing. So that's fascinating to me. And actually, we had tossed around the idea of changing the name of that portion of the framework to be communicative AI literacy rather than rhetorical, because people have such a negative reaction to that word. For
Think it's
whatever.
not relevant to them. They're like, oh, that's not my field.
Yeah. And I don't think when I was in school, the way that freshman comp, for example, was taught was not from the perspective of rhetoric. And so I think that's been a more recent thing. I'm dating myself now, but I think that's been more recent in the probably 20, 25 years still, but that was, I was done by that time. So I think it's more recently become, and so perhaps younger people are more comfortable with the idea of rhetoric and what rhetoric means as a generic term for communication.
Yeah, speaking of argumentation, I was just writing an email this morning to a publisher. I'm writing the second edition of a textbook with two co-authors, and we're negotiating royalties. And I'm building an argument for why the royalties should be higher on the second edition compared to the first, because in the time that's passed, myself and these co-authors have amassed a lot more influence through a large social media following and thought leadership and networks. And this idea of argumentation is important. I use Claude 3.5 to help me think about the audience, the publisher receiving this argument. What assumptions am I making? How I could potentially get in front of any potential rebuttals or counter arguments. And yeah, it's all argumentation. It's everywhere. And so that was interesting about the marketing discussion I have. Okay, I'm looking at the time, Kimberly. I know we have a meeting coming up. I want to end this episode like we did last week with our pit and our peach. Do you want me to go first?
I was just going to say one more thing about audience, just to bring this full circle. We started out talking about fears and faculty and how to get started and whatever. And it just occurred to me, like, maybe they just need to do a quick little analysis of their situation and who is their audience. We often teach, and I would teach my students, like, you don't want your communication to be writer centric. It's not all about you. It's really about your audience and what they want to hear. Who is the audience for faculty?
What do they want?
Students. And so what do they want to hear? They want to be reassured and they want to learn how to use AI because they know their future employers are going to expect them to know how to use it. So if we think about it from the perspective of rhetoric, from the audience standpoint, and not being communicator centric, but really being audience centric, that's our audience. It's students. What do they need?
Yeah, I think that let's leave some homework for our listeners. If you're not yet ready to integrate AI into a course, or maybe you're just getting started, I think your homework is to just talk to your students the first couple of weeks of class. You don't have to go ahead and think about the whole semester about how you might use AI. During your course overview or the first couple of weeks, talk to your students and just listen to them and then take a little while to reflect on it, and then maybe develop one activity this semester that includes AI. That's student informed, and that's easy. Any of us can do that.
Student centered.
Mhm.
That's what we preach.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, great. I like that homework assignment. Baby steps. It's just baby steps. Little Atomic Habits. If you haven't read that book, you should.
That is a good book.
Great book.
All right.
Okay, Hits and Peaches.
Yes, I'll go first. My pit, I mentioned it earlier. I'm in love with this book, The Many Worlds I See. Did I say pit? I meant to say peach. My peach is reading that book and the sense of wonder and awe that she has about science. And I am a science nerd. The way she talks about physics as a young child or teenager is how I used to feel about chemistry. And it's really, I don't know, it just inspired me this week to look at the problems we have in business and higher ed and AI and look at them with this new sort of lens of curiosity and wonder instead of just trying to get everything perfect and everything. And so that is my peach. I need to think about my pit. So do you want to go next and say what your peach is?
Yeah. I'll say my peach of the week is that my son that I sent off for his sophomore year of college last week, my pit was, did I convey my values to him? And I was in a parenting existential crisis. But now he called this week and he said, it was the second day of classes, and he goes, I've now met all my classes and there's a clear front runner, Mom. And I was like, oh, okay, great. It's gonna be PE. No, it was ethics. He is fascinated by ethics. And I said, oh, well, tell me more about Why you, it's going to be a lot of work. It's going to be a lot of reading. It's going to be a lot of writing. I like that stuff. I like thinking about right and wrong, good and bad. I like thinking about what makes something right in one context versus another. And I thought, oh my goodness.
What a nice surprise. I mean,
No, we don't always agree on what is right in a given context, especially politically, but that is fine. The fact that he's thinking about it as a 19-year-old and that he loves that class, like, just,
and you were worried.
it's just a small thing. There could still be lots.
I
Let's
mean,
not focus on the negative. That's my peach.
okay, while you were talking, I was trying to think about a pit. I don't know, nothing horrible happened this week. I'd say the only thing that was a bit of a pit is that I missed my hair appointment. So you can't tell. So I use this powder that I put on my roots to cover my gray hair. It's called Color Wow. Shout out. If you want to be a sponsor, Color Wow. It's incredible. It's a powder. It helps me cover my grays. And I missed my hair appointment for reasons we don't need to discuss, but something that has happened probably 5 times now, you'd think I'd learned my lesson is, so first of all, put on the color after you do your makeup. I have made the mistake several times of putting it on first and I get it around my hairline and then I put on my foundation and I smear it across my face. And then I just look like I have dirt on my face and then I have to totally redo my makeup again. And I did that twice this week. So total waste of time, rookie mistake, even though I've been using Color Wow for years. Uh,
Okay.
yeah,
Wow.
it happened this morning, so it's top of
Never
mind.
done that. Clearly, I'm not hiding my grays. This is gonna be a shout out to other women my age. I am starkly in the middle of perimenopause and I cannot stay focused. I can stay focused, but I get so ultra focused that I forget about other priorities. And this seems to be getting worse. It was a superpower for a long time. It was a superpower, right? Productivity wise. But now it's, oh my God, the stuff I focus on is all out of whack, all out of whack. And so I'm just not, I'm not able to get stuff done. And I already have a problem with connecting my value to my productivity, which is a problem that I'm working on. We don't have to hustle for our worth, as Brene Brown says, but it's really complicating my relationship with all things professional because I'm just constantly fighting what I'm just going to call like perimenopausal brain fog that's just cramping my style.
I know, I think I called you yesterday and you were like, Jessica, I have been editing videos.
Oh, 4 hours, 4 hours adding memes, stupid Donald Duck memes to our professional academic videos. So for levity, if you need a good laugh, go watch some of our short videos on our YouTube channel.
Okay, it happens.
It happens.
All right, that is a wrap on
Do
this week's.
homework.
Yeah, do your homework, drop some comments. We'd love to hear about how it goes if you have a chance to talk to your students. And for me, it's my first week of classes, so I'll be talking to mine, and we'd love to hear from any of you if you're doing the same. See you next week.